The automatic doors of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport Terminal C slid open at 5:47 a.m., releasing a blast of air-conditioned cold into the humid Texas dawn. Sarah Mitchell stepped through, her right leg dragging slightly, a barely perceptible hitch in her gait that she'd spent years trying to hide. It flared up worse when she was tired, and after 3 connecting flights from a veterans advocacy conference in Seattle, exhausted didn't even begin to cover it. She adjusted the strap of her worn backpack, feeling the familiar ache radiate from her shoulder down to her fingertips. Old injuries had a way of announcing themselves at the worst possible times. The University of Texas hoodie she wore, faded burnt orange with a coffee stain shaped like Florida on the front, had seen better days. So had the jeans, ripped at one knee not by fashion but by genuine wear. Her sneakers, once white, were now a dingy gray that no amount of washing could fix. Sarah caught her reflection in a glass partition and winced. Gray streaks shot through her dark hair, which she'd pulled into a messy ponytail without bothering to brush it first. Dark circles under her eyes made her look every one of her 42 years and then some. She looked exactly like what she was, a tired woman catching an early flight, probably heading home to kids and laundry and all the mundane tasks that filled civilian life. She looked nothing like a decorated war hero. Gate 12 appeared ahead and Sarah's stomach tightened. This part never got easier. A cluster of military personnel in crisp uniforms, Air Force dress blues, Marine Corps Service alphas, Army greens, gathered near the podium. Young faces, pressed uniforms, spit-shined boots. They looked like recruiting posters. They looked like she used to look. They looked like they belonged. Sarah approached the gate desk, already reaching into her overstuffed backpack. Where had she put her ID? Her fingers fumbled past a prescription bottle, a dog-eared paperback, wadded receipts, a granola bar she'd forgotten about. "Ma'am." The voice was sharp, authoritative. Sarah looked up. Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison stood at the gate entrance, clipboard in hand, jaw set in that particular expression young NCOs wore when they were determined to do everything by the book. He was maybe 24, with the kind of clean-cut appearance that screamed first deployment. His uniform was so perfectly pressed it could probably stand up on its own. "Ma'am, this is a military charter flight," Morrison said, his tone suggesting he'd already made up his mind about her. "Civilian passengers need to use Gate 25 down that way." He gestured vaguely toward the main terminal. "I'm military," Sarah replied quietly, still digging through her bag. "Come on, where was that damn ID?" Morrison's eyes flicked over her, the hoodie, the ripped jeans, the messy hair. His expression hardened into something between suspicion and disapproval. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside and let authorized personnel board." Behind Morrison, other service members were watching now. A young Marine nudged his buddy. A female airman whispered something Sarah couldn't hear but could definitely imagine. "I am authorized," Sarah said, fighting to keep her voice level. "I'm just looking for my here." She pulled out her military ID, the plastic card creased and worn from years in her wallet. Her hand trembled slightly as she held it out, a tremor that had started after the crash and never quite gone away. Some days it was worse than others. Today, apparently, was one of the bad days. Morrison took the ID and Sarah watched his face change. Confusion first, then suspicion, then something harder. "This says Colonel," he said slowly, looking from the ID to Sarah and back again. His tone made it clear. He didn't believe it for a second. "That's correct." "Ma'am, is this actually your ID?" Around them, the whispers grew louder. Sarah could feel eyes on her, judging, assessing, finding her wanting. A decade ago, she could have silenced this entire gate with a single look. Now she just looked like someone's exhausted mother trying to catch a flight. "Yes, it's mine," Sarah said, her patience fraying. "If you check your manifest." "The manifest lists Colonel S. Mitchell." Morrison's voice had risen now, drawing even more attention. 2 airmen in the back row openly stared. One had his phone out. And that's clearly not you, ma'am. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Sarah felt her face flush, not with embarrassment but with anger she forced herself to swallow. She'd commanded combat missions. She'd flown through enemy fire. She'd made split-second decisions that saved lives. And now she was being accused of, what? Stealing someone's identity to catch a free military flight. Sergeant, I'm ordering you to check with your commanding. You're not ordering me to do anything, Morrison snapped, his voice sharp enough that several passengers jumped. His hand moved to his radio. This is Gate 12. I need security. Possible stolen valor situation. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Stolen valor. The accusation that haunted real veterans who didn't fit the picture-perfect image people expected. She'd seen it happen to others. Wounded warriors, scarred survivors, people with invisible injuries who dressed in comfortable civilian clothes because uniforms hurt or triggered them or simply didn't fit their changed bodies anymore. She'd never imagined it would happen to her. This is ridiculous, a voice muttered from the seating area. Sarah couldn't tell if they meant her or Morrison. Morrison turned toward the voice. Something you want to say, Private? The young Marine who'd spoken shrank back. No, Sergeant. Sarah stood frozen, her backpack suddenly weighing 1,000 pounds. Other passengers were definitely filming now. This would be online within the hour. Stolen valor accusation at DFW airport. Woman claims to be colonel. She could already see the headlines, feel the judgment. She opened her mouth to speak, to defend herself, to pull rank, to do something, when heavy footsteps echoed from the jetway. Sergeant Morrison, what's the holdup? A frustrated voice called out. We're already 10 minutes behind schedule and I've got a weather window closing in. The voice stopped. Completely. Utterly. Dead. Sarah looked up toward the jetway entrance. A pilot stood there, frozen mid-stride, a pre-flight checklist falling from his fingers. It hit the ground with a plastic clatter that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Captain Mike Torres stared at her, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and something that looked almost like fear. Then his hand snapped up in the sharpest salute Sarah had seen in 5 years. Colonel Mitchell, he breathed, his voice cracking. Ma'am. Every service member within hearing distance shot to their feet like they'd been electrocuted. And Sarah knew everything was about to change. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. The gate area seemed suspended in time, passengers half standing, Morrison's hand frozen on his radio, Sarah caught between humiliation and confusion. Captain Mike Torres stood in the jetway entrance like he'd seen a ghost. His eyes, wide with recognition, never left Sarah's face. The pre-flight checklist lay forgotten at his feet, pages scattering in the air-conditioning breeze. Ma'am, Torres said again, his voice stronger now but thick with emotion. He held the salute, arm rigid, perfect. I had no idea you'd be on this flight. Morrison's face shifted from stern authority to confusion. Sir, this civilian claimed to be Black Talon Actual. Torres didn't shout it, he announced it. The words rang through Gate 12 like a bell, like a battle cry, like a prayer. His voice cracked on the last syllable, raw with something between reverence and disbelief. The effect was instantaneous and electric. Every service member in the gate area snapped to attention. Conversations died mid-word. The Marine who'd been slouching in his seat launched upright so fast his coffee cup clattered to the floor. An Air Force major who'd been scrolling through his phone dropped it. A Navy lieutenant's mouth fell open, actually fell open, like a cartoon character. Even the gate agent, a civilian woman in her 50s, straightened up, sensing something momentous had just happened even if she didn't understand what. Torres strode forward, his polished shoes clicking on the tile floor. He stopped 3 feet from Sarah and held her gaze. His eyes were wet. Ma'am, the last time I saw you, his voice broke. He swallowed hard, tried again. The last time I saw you, you were pulling my squad out of hell, Helmand Province. December 2011. You flew into a hot LZ in a bird that was already shot to pieces, took fire for 40 straight minutes, and you didn't leave until every single one of us was on board. Sarah's throat tightened. She remembered that night, remembered all of them, but she didn't remember faces anymore. Just the terror in young voices calling for help, just the weight of responsibility. Martinez, Patterson, Lee, Kowalski, Chen. Torres was listing names now, his voice gaining strength. 17 men in my squad, ma'am. You saved all 17 of us. Martinez has 2 kids now. Patterson just got married. They're alive because you wouldn't leave us behind. Somewhere in the back, someone gasped, "Oh my God." "Wait," a female airman said, her voice rising with recognition. "Helmand Province 2011, that was the miracle of Helmand. That was," she looked at Sarah with dawning wonder, "that was you." An older master sergeant, grizzled and gray, pushed through the small crowd. His eyes were sharp, calculating, putting pieces together. Helmand Province, December. That extraction made the news. They said the helicopter took so much damage it should have fallen out of the sky. He studied Sarah with new intensity. They said the pilot flew it back to base on one engine with half the tail rotor gone and hydraulics failing. They said it was impossible. It was, a young pilot near the window breathed. "We studied that flight at Fort Rucker. The damage assessment photos," he shook his head. "Nobody could explain how that bird stayed airborne." Tor's hands were shaking now. "She landed in that LZ 4 times that night, ma'am. 4 times. Command ordered her to stand down after the second run. The Taliban had the whole valley zeroed in. Every bird that went in was taking fire. She said," he looked at Sarah, "Do you remember what you said?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "I said my boys were still out there." "My boys are still out there, so am I," Torres repeated, and now he was openly crying. "You disobeyed a direct order, ma'am. You could have been court-martialed. Instead, they gave you a—" He stopped, staring at her. "The Distinguished Flying Cross, the Silver Star. You received the Silver Star for that night." The silence that followed was deafening. Morrison stood frozen, his face the color of old newspaper. His radio dangled from his fingers, forgotten. The blood had drained so completely from his face that Sarah worried he might faint. "Oh God," Morrison whispered. "Oh God, what did I do?" A young soldier who'd been filming the confrontation was frantically swiping at his phone, deleting the video, his hands shaking so badly he could barely manage it. Others who'd been watching with smug satisfaction now looked at the floor, at the ceiling, anywhere but at Sarah. The female lieutenant who'd mentioned writing her thesis pushed forward. She couldn't have been more than 25, her uniform crisp, her eyes bright. "Colonel Mitchell, ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Jessica Kim. I wrote my academy thesis on your tactical innovations in Fallujah. The insertion techniques you developed, they're still being taught. Her voice cracked. "You're the reason I became a pilot. You're the reason I believed I could." "Fallujah," another voice said, an older captain wearing a Purple Heart ribbon. "You were there too, the angel of Fallujah, that was you." The master sergeant who'd spoken earlier nodded slowly. "Black Talon actual, I should have recognized the call sign. You flew 73 combat missions in Iraq. 73. You were shot down 3 times and got back in the cockpit every time. He stopped, really looking at Sarah now, at the way she stood favoring her left leg, at the faded scars visible on her hands, at the exhaustion etched into her face. "You crashed, for real, I mean. That's why you—" He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. Sarah felt every eye on her now, not with suspicion or judgment anymore, but with something worse, pity mixed with awe, a toxic combination that made her want to disappear. "It was 2012, she said quietly. "RPG over Kandahar. My co-pilot didn't make it. My crew chief lost both his legs. I got lucky." "Lucky?" Tor's voice cracked. "Ma'am, you spent 14 months in recovery. I heard—" He stopped himself. "You heard what?" Sarah asked, though she already knew. "That you'd never walk again," Tor said softly. "That the injuries were too severe, but here you are." Here she was, standing in an airport in ripped jeans and a stained hoodie, being accused of stolen valor by a kid who didn't know better. Here she was, the legendary Black Talon actual, looking nothing like the hero everyone expected. Morrison made a sound, something between a sob and a groan. "Ma'am, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "You thought I was a faker," Sarah said, not unkindly. "You thought I was trying to scam a free flight or stolen valor my way onto a military charter. You saw someone who didn't look military and assumed I wasn't." "Yes, ma'am," Morrison whispered, tears streaming down his face now. "I was wrong. I was so wrong." Sarah looked around at all of them, at the faces filled with shock and shame and newfound respect. At Tors, still standing at attention, still holding her gaze. At Morrison, who looked like his world had just shattered. She was so tired, tired of being a legend, tired of carrying the weight of other people's expectations, tired of being invisible one moment and worshipped the next with nothing in between. But they were all watching, waiting to see what she'd do next. So Sarah Mitchell, who'd once commanded the most elite helicopter squadron in the U.S. military, who'd flown through hell and brought 73 men home, who'd disobeyed orders and been decorated for it, who'd crashed and burned and learned to walk again, Sarah did what she'd always done. Sarah took a slow breath and gestured for everyone to sit. "At ease, all of you." The command in her voice was undeniable, quiet but absolute. Even in civilian clothes, even limping, even exhausted, she radiated the kind of authority that couldn't be taught or faked. It was earned in fire and blood. The service members sat, but nobody relaxed. They perched on the edges of their seats like students waiting for a teacher to speak. Morrison remained standing, tears still streaming down his face, his body rigid with shame. Sarah turned to him first. "Sergeant Morrison, look at me." He raised his eyes, red-rimmed and devastated. "What you did wasn't wrong," Sarah said. Morrison's face crumpled with confusion. "Ma'am, I accused you of." "You were doing your job. You saw someone who didn't match what you expected to see and you questioned it. That's not wrong. What matters is what you do with this moment. Do you learn from it, or do you let shame paralyze you?" I don't know, ma'am." Sarah pulled up her sleeve, revealing the burn scar that snaked from her wrist to her elbow, thick, ropey tissue that gleamed unnaturally under the fluorescent lights. Several people gasped. "This is from the crash," she said. "When the fuel tank ruptured, I was covered in burning hydraulic fluid. My co-pilot, Lieutenant David Chen, threw himself over me to put out the flames. That's how he died, buying me 3 extra seconds." The gate was silent, except for the distant sound of an announcement echoing through the terminal. Sarah pulled out her phone with practiced efficiency, swiping to a photo. She held it up so everyone could see. It showed a younger version of herself, strong, confident, unbroken. She stood in full flight gear in front of a Black Hawk helicopter, helmet under one arm, a fierce smile on her face. She looked like every recruiting poster ever made. She looked invincible. "This is who I was in 2011, Sarah said. "This is Black Talon actual. This is the woman who flew those missions Captain Tors mentioned. This is what you expected to see when you heard my rank and call sign." She swiped to the next photo. The collective intake of breath was audible. The image showed Sarah in a hospital bed, barely recognizable. Her face was swollen and bandaged. Tubes ran everywhere into her arms, her chest, her mouth. Her right leg was held together by an external fixator that looked like medieval torture device, metal pins driven directly into bone. "This is what happened after," Sarah said quietly. 3 weeks after the crash, I'd already had 6 surgeries. I'd have 12 more. The doctors said I'd never walk without crutches. They said I'd never fly again. They said a lot of things. Tors stepped forward. "Ma'am, I was deployed when I heard about your crash. We all thought," his voice broke, "we thought we'd lost you." "You almost did," Sarah swiped to another photo. This one showed her in a wheelchair, hollow-eyed and gaunt, barely a shadow of the warrior she'd been. This was 6 months later. I weighed 97 pounds. I was on so many painkillers I couldn't remember my own name half the time. I wanted to die. The young lieutenant, Jessica Kim, covered her mouth with her hand. "Ma'am, I'm not telling you this for sympathy," Sarah said firmly. "I'm telling you this because you need to understand something. That crash didn't just take my ability to fly. It took everything that made me, me." She pulled her pant leg up, revealing the prosthetic joint at her ankle, a complex piece of titanium and carbon fiber that replaced the ankle joint she'd shattered beyond repair. The explosion crushed my ankle. 3 reconstructive surgeries failed. Finally, they fused it. This, she tapped the metal, is why I limp. It's why I can't stand in formation for hours anymore. It's why I can't wear combat boots or dress shoes without excruciating pain. She let the pant leg drop and looked around at all of them. The crash gave me a traumatic brain injury that affects my balance and gives me vertigo. I can't pass a flight physical anymore because I can't track fast-moving objects without getting dizzy. My right hand has nerve damage. That's why it shakes. I have chronic pain in my spine, my shoulder, my leg. Some days, I can barely get out of bed. Morrison made a choked sound. And the worst part, Sarah's voice was softer now, more vulnerable. The worst part is that none of it shows. When people see me in uniform, they see the decorations and the rank and they see a hero. When they see me like this, she gestured at her civilian clothes, they see nothing. Or worse, they see someone who doesn't belong. She paused, letting that sink in. There are thousands of veterans like me, Sarah continued. Tens of thousands. They gave everything in service to this country, and their reward is to become invisible. They can't wear their uniforms anymore because the fabric hurts their scars or triggers their PTSD. They limp through airports and get stared at. They dress in comfortable clothes and get accused of stolen valor. A female sergeant in the third row spoke up, her voice trembling. "Ma'am, I have severe PTSD from my deployment. I can't wear my uniform anymore. The smell of the fabric, the feel of it, it takes me right back to the worst day of my life. So I travel in civilian clothes and people look at me like I'm nothing, like I'm just some woman taking up space." Sarah nodded. "What's your name?" "Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, ma'am. I served 2 tours in Afghanistan." "Thank you for your service, Maria, and thank you for being brave enough to speak up." An older man, wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I got blown up in Desert Storm, medically discharged in '91. Spent 30 years having people question whether I was really a veteran because I was young when I got out and didn't look military. I got denied service at a restaurant once because the owner thought my DD-214 was fake." More stories began to flow. A young airman who'd lost hearing in one ear and couldn't pass flight status. A Marine who'd been sexually assaulted and couldn't be around groups of men in uniform without having panic attacks. An Army medic who'd seen so much death that the smell of military laundry detergent made her vomit. The invisible wounded, the forgotten heroes. Sarah listened to each one, acknowledging them, validating them. And slowly, the atmosphere in the gate area shifted. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about all of them, everyone who'd served and paid prices that couldn't be seen on a ribbon rack. Torres moved closer to Sarah, speaking quietly so only she could hear. "Ma'am, I never knew. I heard you'd crashed, but I didn't know it was that bad." "Nobody did," Sarah replied. "I made sure of that. After 14 months of recovery, they offered me a medical retirement at full rank and benefits. I could have taken it, should have taken it, but I couldn't stop. So they found me a desk job at the Pentagon, advisory role. I consult on tactics, review mission plans, testify before Congress about veteran affairs. I fight for people like Maria and all these others." "That's why you're on this flight," Torres said, understanding dawning. "You're heading back to theater." Sarah nodded. "There's a situation at Bagram, but we'll talk about that in the air." She turned back to Morrison, who still stood frozen, his face a mask of anguish. "Sergeant Morrison, come here." He approached like a man walking to his execution. "Do you understand now why I wasn't angry with you?" "No, ma'am," he whispered. "You should have destroyed me. You could have ended my career with one word." "And what would that teach you? What would that teach anyone?" Sarah's voice was gentle now. "You made an assumption based on appearance. You judged a book by its cover, but you did it because you care about protecting military integrity. That instinct isn't wrong, it just needs refinement." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm giving you an opportunity, Sergeant. Take this lesson. Remember this moment. And the next time you see a veteran who doesn't fit your expectations, give them the benefit of the doubt. See them. Really see them." Morrison's face crumpled. "Yes, ma'am, I swear I'll never forget this." "Good, now go splash some water on your face. We board in 10 minutes. As Morrison hurried toward the restroom, Torres turned to Sarah with admiration in his eyes. "You just turned the worst moment of that kid's career into the best lesson he'll ever learn." Sarah smiled sadly. "That's all I can do anymore, Mike. I can't fly, I can't fight, but I can teach, I can lead. And I can make sure the next generation understands that heroism comes in all forms, including the broken ones." The boarding call came at 6:15 a.m. As passengers lined up, Sarah noticed something remarkable happening. Service members were deliberately holding back, creating space for her at the front of the line. It wasn't ordered, it was instinctive, a spontaneous show of respect that made her throat tight. "Ma'am, after you," a young Air Force lieutenant said, gesturing toward the jetway. "I can wait my turn," Sarah replied. "With respect, ma'am, you've waited long enough." Torres appeared at her elbow. "Colonel Mitchell, I'd be honored if you'd ride jump seat in the cockpit. My co-pilot will be thrilled. He paused, smiling. "Well, you'll see." Sarah nodded, grateful. The cockpit meant she wouldn't have to navigate the narrow aisle with her bad leg, wouldn't have to squeeze into seats that made her spine scream. It meant dignity. As they walked down the jetway, Torres spoke quietly. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why don't you wear your uniform? I mean, I understand the physical pain, but you have to know that if people saw your rank, your ribbons, your wings, they'd never question you." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "After the crash, I tried. For the first 6 months back on duty, I wore my uniform every single day. Full dress blues to the Pentagon, even though I was just pushing papers. I thought if I looked like a soldier, I'd feel like a soldier." "What happened?" "One day I was walking through the Pentagon food court. A group of Marines saw me, young guys, probably fresh from boot camp. They saw my silver star, my distinguished flying cross, all my combat decorations. And one of them said, loud enough for me to hear, 'Must be nice getting medals for desk duty.'" Torres stopped walking. "They didn't know." "No, they saw a female colonel with a limp and assumed I'd ridden coattails to rank, assumed my medals were participation trophies." Sarah's voice was matter of fact, but Torres could hear the pain underneath. "That's when I realized the uniform didn't protect me anymore. It just made me a target for different assumptions." They reached the cockpit. Torres' co-pilot was running through the pre-flight checklist, her movements precise and confident. When she looked up and saw Sarah, she froze. "Lieutenant Emma Chen, ma'am," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's heart clenched. "Chen, are you related to?" "Lieutenant David Chen was my older brother, ma'am." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "He was your co-pilot. He died in the crash that injured you." The cockpit seemed to shrink. Sarah felt the walls closing in, memories flooding back, the explosion, the flames, David throwing himself over her, his last words. "I've got you, ma'am." "Emma," Sarah breathed. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." "Don't be." Emma stood at attention, tears streaming down her face. "My brother loved flying with you. He wrote to me every week and every letter talked about Black Talon Actual. He said you were the best pilot he'd ever seen, the best commander he'd ever served under. He said, her voice cracked. He said if he ever had to die, he'd want it to be protecting you because you were worth it. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. Tors caught her elbow, steadying her. He saved my life, Sarah said. I should have died in that crash. David gave me the seconds I needed to shut down the fuel system to send the mayday. Everything after, every day I've lived, I owe to your brother. Emma wiped her eyes roughly. Then don't apologize, ma'am. Live the life he bought for you. Make it mean something. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. For 5 years, she'd been drowning in survivor's guilt, questioning whether she deserved to be alive when David wasn't. And here was his sister, telling her to honor his sacrifice by living fully. He'd be proud of you, Sarah said, following in his footsteps, becoming a pilot. I'm trying to follow in yours, ma'am, Emma corrected. David told me about the miracle of Helmand. He told me you flew that mission knowing you might not make it back, and you did it anyway. That's the kind of pilot I want to be. Behind them, passengers were boarding. Sarah could hear the shuffle of feet, the murmur of voices, the metallic click of seatbelts. Through the open cockpit door, she saw Morrison helping an older sergeant stow his carry-on. The young man was transformed, solicitous, respectful, his earlier arrogance completely gone. Tors settled into the captain's seat. Ma'am, jump seat is behind me, best view in the house. Sarah lowered herself carefully into the seat, her leg protesting every movement. The familiar smell of the cockpit washed over her, aviation fuel, electronics, the indefinable scent of flight. For a moment she was 25 again, invincible with the whole sky ahead of her. Then her legs spasmed, and reality crashed back. You miss it, Tors said quietly, watching her face in the reflection on his instruments. Every single day, Sarah admitted. Sometimes I dream I'm flying and everything is perfect. My body works, my balance is good, my hands are steady. Then I wake up and remember. But you're still fighting. It's the only way I know how to be. Sarah watched as Tors and Emma moved through their checklist with practiced efficiency. I can't fly anymore, but I can make sure the next generation flies better, smarter, safer. Emma glanced back. Ma'am, is it true what they say, that you've never lost a pilot under your command? Sarah's face darkened. No, that's a myth. I lost 3 pilots in Iraq. Captain James Rodriguez, his tail rotor was hit by small arms fire. He couldn't maintain altitude and crashed into a building. First Lieutenant Sarah Kim, her engine failed during a dust storm. She never even made it off the ground. And Warrant Officer Marcus Thompson, he took an RPG saving a convoy. All 3 died doing their jobs. The cockpit was silent. I remember their names, Sarah continued. I remember their faces. I remember what they liked to eat, what music they listened to, whether they had kids. I remember everything about them because I sent them into situations where they died, and that's a weight I'll carry forever. That's not your fault, ma'am, Tors said. Isn't it? I was their commander. Their safety was my responsibility. And how many did you save? Emma asked. How many came home because of your decisions? Sarah didn't answer. 73 in one night, Tors said. But that's just one night. How many total, ma'am? Over all your tour. How many pilots flew under your command and lived because you taught them well, because you planned carefully, because you never sent them anywhere you wouldn't go yourself? Sarah closed her eyes. I don't keep count of the ones who lived. I only remember the ones who didn't. That's the difference between you and a bad commander, Emma said. Bad commanders count their victories. Good commanders remember their losses. Through the cockpit window, the sun was rising over Dallas, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Sarah watched a commercial jet take off from a nearby runway, climbing smoothly into the dawn. Did David ever tell you why he requested to fly with me? Sarah asked Emma. He said you were the best. That's not why. I asked him once and he said, "Because you bring people home, ma'am, you always bring people home." That was his priority, not glory, not medals, not even survival, just bringing his brothers and sisters home. Sarah's voice broke. And he brought me home, even though it cost him everything. The cabin door closed with a heavy thunk. A flight attendant poked her head into the cockpit. "Captain Torres, we're secure for departure." Torres keyed his radio. "Dallas ground, Air Mobility Command 472, requesting clearance to taxi." As the aircraft began to move, Sarah felt the familiar vibration through her seat. For a moment, just a brief, shining moment, she was flying again. Then her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, reading the message. Her face went pale. "What is it?" Torres asked, seeing her expression. Sarah looked up, and both pilots saw something in her eyes that made them straighten. A combination of determination and fear they recognized from combat. "There's been a development with the situation at Bagram," Sarah said quietly. "The downed helicopter crew, they're running out of time, and the rescue window just got a lot smaller." Torres and Emma exchanged glances. "How small?" Torres asked. "We have 18 hours to plan an extraction that's already failed 4 times, and if we fail—" Sarah didn't finish. She didn't need to. Because they all understood. More names to remember, more faces that would haunt her dreams. And this time, she wouldn't be in the cockpit to bring them home herself. The Boeing 767 climbed through 30,000 feet, leaving Texas behind. In the main cabin, 73 service members settled in for the 14-hour flight to Bagram Air Base, Afghanistan. Some slept, some read, some stared out windows at clouds that looked like cotton fields stretching to infinity. But nobody could stop talking about the woman in the cockpit. Morrison sat in row 12, staring at his hands. They wouldn't stop shaking. The master sergeant who'd spoken earlier, his name tag read Williams, slid into the seat beside him. "First time meeting a legend?" Williams asked. "First time accusing one of being a criminal," Morrison said bitterly. Williams chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Son, let me tell you about the first time I met Black Talon." Morrison looked up. "It was 2010, Fallujah. I was a staff sergeant then, leading a convoy escort. We got ambushed, classic L-shaped kill zone. RPGs, small arms fire, the whole nightmare. We lost our lead vehicle in the first 30 seconds. 6 men trapped in a burning Humvee, and we couldn't get to them because of the crossfire." Williams's eyes went distant, remembering. "We called for air support. Command said 15 minutes. Those boys didn't have 15 minutes, they had maybe 5 before that vehicle cooked off. Then this voice comes over the radio, calm as Sunday morning. 'This is Black Talon actual, I'm 2 mics out, give me a target.' Command tries to wave her off, says the LZ is too hot, no helicopter can survive it. You know what she said." Morrison shook his head. "I'm not asking permission." Then she just appears, this Black Hawk dropping out of the sky like the angel of death. She's taking fire from 3 directions, tracers lighting up her bird like a Christmas tree. And she just hovers there, steady as a rock, while her crew chief pulls those 6 men out of that burning wreck. "She saved them," Morrison said. "She did more than that. Her helicopter took 47 hits that day. 47. 1 round went through the fuel tank, didn't explode by pure luck. Another took out her hydraulics. She flew that crippled bird back to base on nothing but skill and sheer willpower." Williams turned to Morrison. "You want to know the kicker? She filed a report saying her crew deserved medals, never mentioned herself, never bragged, just did the job and moved on." Morrison felt sick, "And I treated her like garbage." "You made a mistake. She gave you the gift of learning from it. Don't waste it." In the cockpit, Sarah was deep in mission planning. She'd pulled up satellite imagery on her tablet, encrypted files sent from Bagram showing the crash site. Torres glanced over during a routine instrument check and saw the terrain. "That's a nightmare," he breathed. "It's a valley called Tangi Gap," Sarah said. "Narrow, steep walls, perfect ambush territory. The Taliban knows it and uses it. Emma leaned back to look. Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, who's down there? Sarah pulled up a personnel file. A young woman's face filled the screen. Captain Jessica Rains, 27 years old, confident smile, bright eyes. She's got a 4-year-old daughter, Sarah said quietly. Husband's deployed to Iraq. Parents are taking care of the little girl back in Georgia. Rains is a damn good pilot, completed 2 tours, never had an incident, until 3 days ago. What happened? Tours asked. Mechanical failure during a medical evacuation. Her crew was extracting wounded soldiers from a fire base when the tail rotor malfunctioned. She managed to auto-rotate down, textbook emergency landing, but she came down in hostile territory. She, her co-pilot, and her crew chief survived the crash, but they're trapped. Sarah swiped to another image showing the crash site from above. The Black Hawk was a twisted wreck in a narrow valley, surrounded by steep rocky slopes. The Taliban has the high ground, Sarah continued. Every rescue attempt has been met with heavy fire. We've lost 1 helicopter trying, 6 people injured. The crew down there, they're in a crater next to the wreck, using it for cover. They have limited ammunition, dwindling medical supplies, and no way out. Why can't we just bomb the surrounding positions? Emma asked. Because there's a village 200 meters away. Civilians, women and children, we can't risk it. Tours studied the terrain, his pilot's mind calculating angles and approaches. Every conventional route is covered. Come in from the north, you're silhouetted against the sky. From the south, you're flying into a natural funnel where they can concentrate fire. East and west are blocked by ridgelines. Exactly, Sarah said. That's why every attempt has failed. We keep trying the same approaches, expecting different results. Einstein's definition of insanity, Emma murmured. Sarah smiled grimly, which is why we're not going to use conventional approaches. She zoomed in on the map, tracing a route with her finger, a narrow canyon that snaked in from the west, so tight it barely showed on the satellite image. This wadi, it's been written off as unusable, too narrow, too many turns, too dangerous. But if someone could fly through it at low altitude, staying below the ridgeline, they could approach the crash site from an angle the Taliban isn't covering. Tours leaned closer, studying the route. His face went pale. Sarah, that canyon is barely wider than a helicopter's rotor span. One mistake, 1 gust of wind, and you'd clip the walls. I know. And these turns, they're 90-degree angles. You'd have to bank the aircraft almost vertical, with 0 margin for error. I know. This is insane. This is, Tours stopped, understanding dawning. You've flown something like this before. Iraq 2009. Similar terrain, similar situation. I lost a pilot that day trying a conventional approach, so I tried something unconventional. Sarah's voice was distant, remembering. It worked. But you can't fly this mission, Emma said gently. Ma'am, with your injuries. I'm not flying it, you are. The silence in the cockpit was absolute. Even the engine noise seemed to fade. Ma'am, Tours' voice was careful. You want us to fly this mission. I want you to trust me, Sarah said. I can't be in the cockpit, but I'll be in your ear every second. I'll guide you through every turn, every altitude change, every threat. I've studied this terrain for 18 hours straight. I know every rock formation, every wind pattern, every danger point. With respect, ma'am, Emma said, we've never flown anything like this. This kind of precision flying. I know. That's why we're going to spend the next 12 hours training. I'll walk you through it so many times you could fly it in your sleep. By the time we land at Bagram, you'll know this route better than the drive to your own house. Tours met Sarah's eyes. He saw no doubt there, no hesitation. Just the absolute conviction of a commander who knew she could bring her people home. You really think we can do this? He asked. I know you can, because I trained David to fly like me and Emma learned from him. And you, Mike, You flew with me long enough to understand how I think. You have the skills, you just need the confidence." Williams appeared at the cockpit door, having gotten past the flight attendant. "Colonel Mitchell, permission to speak, ma'am." "Granted." Word spreading back there about the rescue mission. The troops, they want to help, they want to volunteer. Sarah stood carefully, her leg protesting. She moved to the cockpit door, looking out at the sea of faces turned toward her. Young and old, officers and enlisted, Air Force, Army, Marines, Navy, all of them looking at her with hope and trust. Morrison stood, his face determined despite the tear tracks still visible on his cheeks. "Ma'am, I volunteer. I know I screwed up today, but if you'll give me a chance." "Why?" Sarah asked. "Why risk your life for pilots you don't know?" "Because you would," Morrison said simply. "Because that's what we do. We don't leave people behind." Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. The armor she'd built around herself after the crash, the protective shell that kept her separate from the mission, from the people, from the pain of caring too much. "All right," she said. "Then let's get to work, because in 18 hours we're bringing our people home, all of them." The aircraft flew on through the sky, carrying legends and learners, heroes and helpers, all bound for a place where courage would be tested and lives would hang in the balance. And in the cockpit, Sarah Mitchell opened her tactical planning software and began to teach 2 pilots how to fly the impossible. Because that's what Black Talon actually did. She made miracles happen. For the next 6 hours, the cockpit of the military charter became an intensive flight school at 30,000 feet. Sarah had Tors and Emma switch seats, taking turns on the controls while she walked them through the canyon route again and again. "Approach from heading 270, Sarah instructed, her voice taking on the crisp authority of an instructor pilot. "Altitude 100 feet AGL. Any higher and you're visible to the ridgeline positions. Any lower and you risk striking obstacles." Emma's hands gripped an imaginary cyclic, her eyes closed as she visualized the route. 270, 100 feet AGL. First turn comes at Point Alpha, a rock formation shaped like a broken tooth. You'll see it on your left, that's your marker. You bank right hard, 60 degrees minimum. The canyon narrows here to 70 feet. Your rotor span is 53 feet. That gives you 8.5 feet on each side. 8.5 feet, Emma repeated, her voice tight. "Ma'am, that's terrifying, I know, but doable. I've flown tighter." Tors opened his eyes. "When?" "Fallujah, 2008. Had to extract a sniper team from a building. The street was 45 feet wide. I had 3 feet of clearance on each side and insurgents firing from windows above me." Sarah's voice was matter of fact. "You learn to trust your instruments and your instincts." She pulled up a 3D simulation on her tablet, custom software she designed herself during her recovery, when she couldn't fly but couldn't stop thinking like a pilot. "Watch." The screen showed a helicopter's eye view of the canyon route. It was stomach-churning, sheer walls rushing past, tight turns that seemed impossible, altitude changes that would make passengers sick. "Point Bravo, second turn," Sarah narrated as the simulation played. "This one's nastier, 90-degree left bank, immediate drop of 50 feet. There's a downdraft here caused by wind coming over the eastern ridge. You'll feel the bird want to sink. Add power before you need it. Anticipate." Emma watched the simulation 3 times, memorizing every detail. "What's the wind speed at ground level?" "Variable, 5 to 15 knots, gusting to 20. It'll buffet you, especially in the turns. Don't fight it, work with it." In the main cabin, Morrison had gathered a group of volunteers. 12 men and women, all combat experienced, all willing to risk their lives for 3 pilots they'd never met. They huddled around Morrison's laptop, watching drone footage of the crash site Sarah had sent them. "The crew is here," Morrison indicated a crater next to the wrecked helicopter. "They've been under fire for 72 hours. Limited ammo, limited water. One of them, the crew chief, has a broken arm and possible internal injuries. A young Marine Corporal, Garcia, studied the terrain. How do we extract them under fire? Fast and aggressive, Morrison said, channeling what he'd learned from listening to Sarah. We rope down, secure the wounded first, get everyone hooked up, and extract. Whole operation needs to happen in under 90 seconds. 90 seconds, Garcia's eyes widened. That's the maximum time Colonel Mitchell estimates we can hold position without taking catastrophic damage. Morrison looked around at the volunteers. This is going to be the most dangerous thing any of us have ever done. The Taliban knows we're coming. They've been waiting for days. They want us to try again. An older Army Sergeant, Patterson, spoke up. You know what? Good. Let them wait. Let them think they've won. Then we come in from an angle they never expected, with Black Talon actual planning every second, and we shove their ambush down their throats. The others nodded, grim determination on their faces. Back in the cockpit, Sarah was drilling tours on emergency procedures. Your tail rotor takes a hit at Point Charlie. What do? Tours didn't hesitate. Reduce power, maintain forward airspeed, prepare for running landing. Your co-pilot is hit and unconscious. You're taking fire from multiple directions. What do? Complete the mission. One pilot can fly the bird, can't complete the mission if I abort. You lose hydraulics in the final approach. How do you compensate? Manual control. It'll feel like I'm fighting the stick, but the bird will respond. Just needs more muscle. Sarah smiled. You've been studying. I flew with you for 9 months in Afghanistan, ma'am. I learned from the best. Emma returned from a bathroom break with coffee for all 3 of them. Ma'am, can I ask you something personal? Go ahead. How do you deal with the fear? Not the mission fear, the fear of being responsible, of knowing that if your plan fails, people die. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the clouds. You don't deal with it, you carry it. Every mission, every decision, every risk you take, you carry the weight of those lives. And if someone dies, you carry that too. It never gets lighter, you just get stronger. Does it get easier? No, but you learn to trust yourself. You learn that fear isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's your mind telling you the stakes are real. The trick is to not let it paralyze you. Emma nodded slowly. My brother David, he wrote me one last letter before he died. I didn't get it until after the crash. He said, if something happens to me, don't be afraid to fly. Fear is just love with nowhere to go. So give it somewhere, give it to the mission, to the people you're saving, to the purpose. Did he learn that from you? Sarah's eyes misted. No, I learned it from him. After I woke up from the crash and they told me he was gone, I wanted to quit. Wanted to never touch a helicopter again. Then they gave me his effects and that letter was there. He'd written it to you, but it saved me. The 3 of them sat in silence, bound by grief and purpose. An hour later, Williams brought food from the cabin, sandwiches that nobody really wanted but everyone forced down anyway. Colonel, the volunteers are ready. Morrison's got them trained up on rope insertion, emergency extraction, all of it. Morrison, Sarah raised an eyebrow. Kids got fire now, ma'am. Your lesson at the gate, it didn't just humble him, it ignited him. He's leading those volunteers like a man possessed. Sarah smiled. Sometimes people need to be broken down before they can be built back up. Is that what the crash did to you? Williams asked, then immediately looked horrified. Ma'am, I'm sorry, that was honest, and yes, the crash broke me completely, but it also showed me what I was really made of. Not skill or strength or fearlessness, just stubborn refusal to quit. She looked at Williams. That's all any of us have, really. The choice to keep going when everything says stop. As they crossed into European airspace, Sarah ran Tors and Emma through the simulation one final time. They were exhausted, running on coffee and adrenaline, but they flew it perfectly. Every turn, every altitude change, every correction. That's it, Sarah said quietly. "You're ready." Torres looked at her. "You sure?" "I'm sure. You're not flying my plan anymore. You've made it yours. That's when I know a pilot is ready." Emma checked her watch. 8 hours to Bagram. "Then get some rest," Sarah ordered. "Both of you. I'll wake you an hour before landing." They hesitated, not wanting to leave her alone, but she shooed them out. When they were gone, Sarah pulled out her phone and opened her photos. She scrolled past the mission images, past the hospital pictures, to one she kept buried deep. It showed her crew from 2011, all of them, young and alive and whole. David Chen grinning on the far right, Rodriguez with his arm around Kim, Thompson making a ridiculous face at the camera, and Sarah in the center, surrounded by people she'd loved and lost. "I'm bringing them home," she whispered to the photo. "Just like I brought you home, just like you brought me home, I promise." Outside the window, the sun was setting over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The color of fire. The color of war. The color of courage being tested one more time. Bagram Air Base materialized through the cockpit window as dawn broke over Afghanistan, a sprawling fortress of concrete, razor wire, and determination carved into hostile territory. The familiar smell hit Sarah the moment the cabin door opened. Dust, jet fuel, and something indefinable that existed only in war zones. The smell of consequence. She limped down the stairs, her leg worse after hours of sitting. The thin mountain air made breathing harder. Or maybe it was just being back in a place where she'd once been invincible and was now anything but. A convoy of vehicles waited on the tarmac. Standing beside a Humvee was Colonel Patricia Hayes, base commander, a woman Sarah had flown with in Iraq, back when they were both young lieutenants who thought they'd live forever. "Sarah Mitchell," Hayes's voice was gravel and smoke, "never thought I'd see you back in theater." They embraced, and Hayes felt how thin Sarah had become, how fragile she seemed despite the steel in her eyes. "Never thought I'd be back, Pat." "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. They headed toward the operations center, Torres, Emma, and Morrison following at a respectful distance. The base was a hive of activity, helicopters lifting off, supply trucks rumbling past, soldiers running drills. But everyone who saw Sarah stopped. Word had spread faster than wildfire. "That's Black Talon Actual," someone whispered. "She's really here. Maybe those pilots have a chance after all." Inside the operations center, the atmosphere was grim. A dozen officers stood around a massive table covered in maps, satellite imagery, and drone footage. The mission board showed 4 failed rescue attempts, each marked with red X's. The time stamp on the latest intel was 3 hours old. Colonel Bradley, a stern-faced man in his 50s, looked up as they entered. His expression was skeptical until he really saw Sarah. Then his face crumbled. "Colonel Mitchell, I didn't expect you to actually come." "Your brother does well, Colonel Bradley?" Sarah asked quietly. His eyes widened. "You remember?" "I remember everyone." Sarah moved to the table, her limp pronounced now. "Show me current status." Hayes pulled up a live drone feed. "Captain Rains, Lieutenant Murphy, and Crew Chief Williams. They're still alive, still pinned down, but they're deteriorating fast. Williams has internal bleeding we can't treat remotely. Murphy took a shrapnel wound yesterday. Rains is holding together, but barely." The feed showed 3 figures huddled in the crater, their helicopter a burned-out skeleton nearby. Occasionally, one would move, confirming life. Taliban positions dotted the surrounding ridges, at least 40 fighters, maybe more. "Every hour we wait, they get weaker," Hayes continued. "And the Taliban gets bolder. They know we want those pilots. They're daring us to try again." Bradley stepped forward. "Colonel Mitchell, I've reviewed your proposal. With all due respect, it's insane. Flying through that canyon, the margins are impossibly tight." "Impossible is just something that hasn't been done yet," Sarah replied, studying the terrain. "I've flown tighter. I've flown worse." But you're not flying this one." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Sarah felt the old wound tear open fresh. The knowledge that she should be in that cockpit, that her hands should be on the controls, that she was sending others to do what she could no longer do herself. "No," she said quietly, "I'm not, but Captain Torres and Lieutenant Chen are more than capable. I've trained them on the route. They're ready." Torres stepped forward. "We're ready, sir. Colonel Mitchell's plan is solid." A younger captain, Reynolds, shook his head. "This is suicide. We've lost too many already. Maybe we need to accept." "Accept what?" Morrison's voice cut through the room like a blade. Everyone turned to stare at the sergeant who'd spoken out of turn. "Accept that we leave our people to die, that we quit because it's hard." Sergeant Reynolds began. "Those pilots down there, they didn't quit when their bird went down. Captain Rains could have panicked, crashed hard, killed everyone. Instead, she auto-rotated down and saved her crew. They've been under fire for 3 days and they're still fighting. And you want to abandon them?" Hayes held up a hand. "Sergeant Morrison, stand down." But Sarah spoke. "No, let him speak." Morrison's face was flushed, passionate. "I met Colonel Mitchell this morning. I treated her like garbage because she didn't look like what I expected a hero to look like. But you know what she did? She taught me that heroism isn't about appearance or comfort or safety. It's about doing what's right when everything says quit." He turned to the room. "Those pilots down there are invisible to everyone except us. Just like wounded veterans are invisible. Just like everyone who gave everything and got broken for it. But we see them, and we're going to bring them home." Silence. Then Williams, the master sergeant, stepped forward. "Morrison's right. I volunteer for the mission." "So do I," said Garcia, the young Marine. "Count me in," added Patterson. One by one, the volunteers from the aircraft stepped forward. 12 people willing to risk everything for 3 they'd never met. Hayes looked at Sarah. "You've inspired quite a following." "I just reminded them who they are," Sarah replied. "Now let's do the same for those pilots." The briefing took 2 hours. Sarah walked them through every second of the flight plan, every contingency, every possible disaster. Her voice was calm, methodical, but her hands shook. The tremor she couldn't control, the reminder of what she'd lost. Torres and Emma absorbed every word, their faces intense with concentration. Morrison and the extraction team memorized their roles. Even the skeptical officers began to see how the pieces fit together. "The key is speed and surprise," Sarah explained. "They're expecting us to come from the north or south, standard approach vectors. We come through the canyon from the west, we're inside their perimeter before they can react. Torres puts down, Morrison's team ropes in, we extract and we're out. Total time on ground, 90 seconds. 90 seconds with 40 Taliban fighters shooting at us," Reynolds muttered. 73 seconds, Sarah corrected. "I've shaved time off the extraction. Morrison, your team needs to move like their lives depend on it, because they do." "We're ready, ma'am," Morrison said with absolute conviction. Bradley studied the plan one more time. "It could work. God help us, it actually could work." "When do we launch?" Hayes asked. Sarah checked the weather report, the intelligence updates, the drone feeds. Her mind calculated factors and variables with the speed of a computer. 1600 hours, just before dusk. The Taliban will be at evening prayers, their attention divided, and the low sun will be in their eyes if they try to track us through the canyon. "That's in 6 hours, Emma said. "Then we have 6 hours to rest, prep, and pray." Sarah looked around the room. "This is a volunteer mission. Anyone who wants out, say so now. No judgment." Nobody moved. "All right then, dismissed. Get food, get rest. We launch at 15:30 for final checks." As the room cleared, Hayes pulled Sarah aside. "You sure about this?" "No, but I'm sure we have to try." "And if it fails, if we lose more people?" Sarah's face was haunted. Then I'll add their names to the list I carry, but at least they'll know we tried. At least those pilots down there will know they weren't forgotten. Hayes gripped her shoulder. You know the old Sarah, the one who flew those 73 men out of Helmand. She would have been in that cockpit herself, injuries or not. The old Sarah got 3 people killed and herself broken, Sarah replied bitterly. Maybe the new Sarah can do better by staying on the ground. The new Sarah is still trying to save everyone, still carrying the weight, still refusing to quit. Hayes smiled sadly. Some things never change. Sarah limped away to find a quiet corner. She needed to think, to pray, to prepare herself for what came next. She found an empty briefing room and sat heavily, her legs screaming. A knock on the door. Emma entered, carrying 2 bottles of water. Thought you might need this, ma'am. Thank you. Emma sat across from her. Can I ask you something? And I want the truth, not the commander answer. Go ahead. Do you think we can really pull this off? Sarah looked at David Chen's sister, at her determined face, her steady hands, her brother's eyes. Honestly, I think it's going to be the hardest flying you've ever done. I think you're going to be terrified. I think every instinct will scream at you to abort. That's not reassuring, ma'am. But I also think you have your brother's courage and my training. I think Tors is one of the best pilots I've ever known. And I think when you're in that canyon with those pilots' lives depending on you, you're going to find strength you didn't know you had. Emma nodded slowly. That's what David said in his last letter. He said, when the moment comes, trust your training and trust yourself. The courage will be there when you need it. He was right, it will be. Will you be okay, watching from the ground instead of flying? Sarah's smile was pained. No, it'll kill me, but that's my burden to bear, not yours. You just focus on flying. Emma stood to leave, then paused. Ma'am, thank you for coming back here, for planning this, for believing we can do it. My brother died believing in you. I understand why. When she was gone, Sarah pulled out her phone one more time. She opened a new message to a number she rarely called, her sister, back in Virginia. If this goes wrong, she typed, tell Mom I love her. Tell her I died doing what I was meant to do. Tell her I'm with David and the others now. She stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Because Black Talon Actual didn't send goodbye messages. She brought people home. At 15:30 hours, the MH-60 Black Hawk sat on the tarmac, rotors spinning, creating a windstorm of dust and determination. Sarah stood in the operations center, surrounded by screens showing multiple camera angles, drone feeds, helmet cams, the cockpit view. Her hands gripped the edge of the console, knuckles white. Black Talon Actual to Black Talon 1, radio check, she said into her headset, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Black Talon 1 loud and clear, ma'am. Tor's voice came through, calm and focused. Black Talon 2, I've got you, Emma added. In the helicopter's cabin, Morrison and his 11-person extraction team sat strapped in, weapons ready, faces set. Morrison caught his reflection in the window. He looked different than he had 12 hours ago. Harder, more certain, like a man who'd found his purpose. All stations, this is Black Talon Actual. Mission is go, bring our people home. The Black Hawk lifted off, nose dipping as it accelerated away from Bagram. Sarah watched the feed, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was the worst part, the helplessness. The knowing that she'd done everything she could, and now it was in other hands. Hayes stood beside her. Your plan is solid, Sarah. Plans are just wishes, until they survive contact with reality. The helicopter flew low and fast toward the western approach. Sarah watched the terrain unfold on the screens, comparing it to the maps she'd memorized. Coming up on Point Alpha in 30 seconds, Tors reported. Copy, remember bank right 60 degrees minimum, trust your instruments. Through the cockpit camera, Sarah saw the rock formation, the broken tooth, appear on the left. Tors banked hard, the world tilting sideways on screen. The canyon walls rushed past, impossibly close. Sarah held her breath. "Good, good," she murmured. "You're dead center. Maintain altitude." In the cockpit, Emma's hands moved across the instruments with practiced precision. "Airspeed 120, altitude 100 feet AGL." "I see the first narrow section," Tors said, tension creeping into his voice. "It's tighter than the simulation." "It always is," Sarah replied calmly. "Trust your training, you've got this." The helicopter threaded through the canyon, rotors creating echoes that bounced off stone walls. In the cabin, Morrison felt his stomach lurch with every turn. This was flying like he'd never experienced, aggressive, dangerous, inches from disaster. "Point Bravo 10 seconds, Emma called out. "Here comes the hard part," Sarah said. 90-degree left bank, immediate 50-foot drop. Add power before you feel the downdraft." Tors' hands tightened on the controls. "Adding power now." The helicopter banked left, seemed to hang in space for a heartbeat, then dropped. The downdraft hit them like a fist, trying to slam them into the canyon floor. But Tors had anticipated it. The added power kept them stable. "Beautiful," Sarah's voice carried relief and pride. "You're through the worst of it. Point Charlie in 20 seconds, then you're at the LZ." In the operations center, every officer was watching now. Even the skeptical ones were leaning forward, caught up in the audacity of what they were witnessing. "I'll be damned," Bradley whispered. "She's actually pulling it off." "She always does," Hayes replied. But Sarah wasn't celebrating. Point Charlie was where everything could still go wrong. "Black Talon 1, you're going to see the crash site in 5 seconds. The LZ is 30 meters north of the wreck. Taliban positions are on the ridgeline. They haven't seen you yet, but they will the second you land. You'll have 90 seconds, maybe less." "Copy, ma'am. Beginning approach now." The Black Hawk burst from the canyon into the valley. For a moment, just a moment, they had surprise on their side. Then the shooting started. "Taking fire," Emma shouted. "Multiple positions." "Flares evasive," Sarah commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Stay on target." Tors threw the helicopter into a tight spiral, flares streaming behind them like falling stars. Tracer rounds lit up the air, a deadly light show. But he kept descending, kept driving toward the LZ. 30 meters, 2010. The Black Hawk slammed down hard. Morrison didn't wait for the order. "Geo, Geo, Geo." The extraction team poured out, fast-roping down even though they were only 6 feet off the ground. Morrison hit the dirt running, bullets kicking up dust around him. He could see the crater, see 3 figures huddled there, barely moving. "U.S. Army," he screamed, "we're getting you out." Captain Jessica Raines looked up, and Morrison saw the moment she realized salvation had arrived. Her face, gaunt and exhausted, transformed with desperate hope. "Williams is bad," she gasped. "He needs—" "We've got him," Morrison interrupted, already moving. 4 team members were pulling the wounded crew chief up, strapping him into a litter. "Can you move?" "I can run if it means getting out of this hellhole." Bullets tore through the air. Morrison felt one pass so close to his head he heard it buzz like an angry bee. He grabbed Raines, half carrying her toward the helicopter. In the operations center, Sarah watched it all on screen. 60 seconds, she said, keeping her voice level. "Tors, you're taking fire from your 3 o'clock." "I see them," Tors replied, and Emma returned fire with the door gun, tracers ripping into enemy positions. Morrison and his team reached the helicopter. They threw the wounded crew chief aboard, then Raines and Murphy. The extraction team scrambled in, counting heads, making sure everyone was accounted for. "We're loaded," Morrison shouted. "Go," Sarah commanded. "Tors, get them out of there." The Black Hawk lifted off in a storm of dust and gunfire. A Taliban fighter with an RPG stepped out from cover, aiming at the helicopter. Morrison, still half hanging out the door, raised his rifle and fired 3 quick shots. The fighter went down. "RPG threat neutralized," Morrison reported, his voice shaking. "Good shooting," Sarah said. "Tors back through the canyon, same route, double time." "Ma'am, with respect, we're heavy and taking damage. The canyon run was hard enough empty." "You can do this," Sarah interrupted, absolute conviction in her voice. "I know you can. Trust yourself like I trust you." Tors met Emma's eyes. She nodded. "Roger that, Black Talon actual, taking the canyon." The return flight was even more harrowing. The helicopter, weighted down with extra personnel and shot full of holes, handled sluggishly. Tors fought the controls, muscles straining, as Emma called out altitude and distance. "You're drifting left, correct 2 degrees, there." They banked through the turns, scraped through the narrows, rode out the downdrafts. Sarah watched every second, her hands clenched so tight they cramped, her voice guiding them through each obstacle. And then, suddenly, they burst from the canyon into open sky. "We're clear," Tors shouted, and the operations center erupted in cheers. Sarah sagged against the console, tears streaming down her face. Hayes caught her, holding her up. "You did it," Hayes whispered. "You brought them home." 20 minutes later, the Black Hawk touched down at Bagram. Medics rushed forward as the doors opened. They carried out Williams first, then helped Rains and Murphy. All 3 were alive. Sarah limped across the tarmac, her legs screaming in protest, but she didn't care. Rains was on a stretcher, oxygen mask on her face, but her eyes were open. When she saw Sarah, she tried to salute. Sarah took her hand instead. "You did good, Captain. You kept your crew alive. You brought them home." "You brought us home," Rains whispered. "Who are you?" "Just someone who refuses to leave people behind." Tors and Emma climbed down from the cockpit, exhausted and shaking. Sarah met them with open arms, embracing them both. "Perfect flying," she said. "Both of you. David would be proud." Emma was crying. "We did it. We actually did it." "You did it," Sarah corrected. "I just showed you the way. You found the courage." Morrison approached hesitantly. His uniform was filthy, and he had a cut above his eyebrow from flying debris. "Ma'am, Sarah pulled him into the embrace. "You saved them, Sergeant. You ran into hell and brought them out. That's who you are now. Remember that." The sun was setting over Bagram, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Sarah stood on the tarmac, surrounded by people she'd helped save, not by flying herself, but by teaching, planning, believing. Hayes approached with a phone. "The press wants a statement. They're calling it the miracle of Tangi Gap. They want you." "Give the statement to Tors and Emma," Sarah interrupted. They flew the mission. Morrison and his team went into the fire. Rains and her crew survived 3 days in hell. They're the heroes. "But you planned it all. And that's enough for me." Sarah looked at the helicopter, bullet-scarred and battered, but home. "I don't need the glory anymore, Pat. I just need to know they made it." 3 months later, back in Virginia, Sarah received a package. Inside was a photo of Captain Jessica Rains with her 4-year-old daughter, both smiling at the camera. On the back, Rains had written, "She has her mother because you wouldn't quit. Thank you, Black Talon Actual." Also in the package was a letter from Morrison. He'd been promoted and was training to become an NCO instructor. "I'm going to teach the next generation what you taught me," he wrote. "To see people, not uniforms, to value service over appearance, to never leave anyone behind. You changed my life in a single day. I'll spend the rest of mine trying to honor that lesson." Sarah pinned both items to her office wall, next to the photo of her old crew. She looked at them every morning, reminders that heroism came in many forms. Sometimes it was flying through fire. Sometimes it was surviving impossible odds. Sometimes it was planning from the ground and trusting others to execute. And sometimes it was just showing up at an airport in civilian clothes, getting accused of being a fake, and turning that moment into a lesson about invisible wounds and hidden valor. Sarah Mitchell would never fly again. Her body was broken, her wings clipped, her legend retired. But she was still fighting, still bringing people home, still proving that the most important battles were often fought by those no one saw coming. Because that's what heroes did. They kept fighting, even when nobody was watching, even when nobody knew their name. Especially then. The end.